जो एग्रीगेटर कंपनियां हैं ये इलीगल चल रही हैं।
दिल्ली में ओला और उबर कैब के कई ड्राइवर हड़ताल पर हैं।
Ride-sharing platforms economy is on a recovery path in India.
India's ride-hailing and taxi segment is projected to reach $12.77 billion.
Bike taxi platform Rapido has raised $180 million in its latest Series D funding.
A new app aims to deliver some relief to commuters.
Ladies and gentlemen, the taxi revolution is here and Ola and Uber are in deep trouble.
Ola and Uber cab drivers are on indefinite nationwide strike.
Ride-hailing app Ola likely to hand out pink slips to at least 500 employees.
News coming in from Ola this morning. Hemant Bakshi, the CEO of Ola Cabs, has resigned.
Uber has lost $2.8 billion last year.
For years now, Ola and Uber have been single-handedly ruling the ride-hailing market with over 70% share. But you know what? Behind this control are tiny gaps that have now become billion-dollar opportunities, which are eating away Uber and Ola's business each and every day.
Rapido announcing its plans to expand.
InDrive is a unicorn.
Namma Yatri app aims to challenge the corporate giants.
So much so that even after 20 years of having ride-hailing in India, not even a single player in this market is completely profitable. So what is so difficult about this industry that even the player who introduced ride-hailing in India, Meru Cabs, has been shifting its focus away from this market? What are these billion-dollar gaps that are transforming the landscape of ride-hailing in India and eating away Uber and Ola's share? And most importantly, what are some of the key things you need to keep in mind if you're building a ride-hailing business in India today? So the first question, what is so challenging about the ride-hailing industry that makes it so difficult to crack? Before we dive deeper into this, let's first understand the concept of ride-hailing. You see, ride-hailing is built on a very simple idea that involves three parties: a driver, a customer, and the platform. Essentially, the job of this platform is to make the lives of the driver and the customer much easier by connecting them with each other. Now, this can happen in a variety of ways differently, which we will understand later in the video. Ola and Uber operate on something known as the aggregator model. Here, Ola and Uber onboard drivers who already have the vehicles and connect them to the customer using a mobile app. In return for this service, the platform takes a commission out of the fare charged to the customer, which typically ranges from 25 to 40% depending on multiple factors. Through this, Ola and Uber are able to gain access to drivers much faster with limited oversight. In fact, all ride-hailing companies cite something known as a network effect.
The network effect, like in the case of Ola and Uber, you need the cab drivers as well as the customers. You need to be constantly onboarding both of them.
To explain how they aim to turn successful eventually. This is basically a very simple idea which says the more drivers Uber gets under their network, the lower will be the waiting time for the customers, who in turn will book more rides as a result of this low waiting time, which will lead to higher earnings for the drivers. This will then attract more and more drivers and the cycle will continue. Seems quite straightforward, right? Well, not really. You see, there are a few fundamental challenges specific to India's ride-hailing market and the aggregator model. The first challenge is quite possibly one of the most interesting and most important customer insights for you to note if you are building a ride-hailing business in India today. And that is the lack of customer loyalty. Let me explain how. You see, in the ride-hailing market, your customers' needs are quite dynamic and can vary throughout the day. For example, a college student might prefer a platform like BluSmart in the morning when he has to reach on time for a class, and would not mind paying a premium to ensure that he does not get late. At the same time, while coming back home, he would probably look for a more cost-effective solution with a platform like Ola or Uber, since he is not in much of a hurry. In this case, it was the reliability of BluSmart for getting on time in the morning and the cost-effectiveness of Ola or Uber for saving money in the evening. This means that the same customer has multiple ride-hailing apps on the same mobile phone and is thus not loyal to a specific platform. This actually indicates that there is a very low switching cost for the customer, which clearly showcases that if you are a new entrant with an innovative value proposition, getting the first set of customers to try out your platform can be relatively easier than most industries. And speaking of value proposition, there comes another challenge of limited product differentiation. You see, as a service, ride-hailing companies can ideally differentiate by controlling only two broad factors: price and experience. In fact, here is where you might be able to discover the next billion-dollar opportunity in this market. If you look closely right now, this graph showcases 4 quadrants that explains India's competitive landscape on the basis of the extent of control that a platform chooses to maintain on price and the customer experience. Let's try and understand how exactly Uber and Ola fit within this framework. Well, first, the aggregator model allows the platform to dictate the price for both the customer and the driver. This means that if the driver and customer choose to accept the ride through Ola or Uber, they have no option but to accept the fare that is given to them. So it is quite clear that these companies exercise high control over the price. At the same time, delivering a superior customer experience is not as much of a priority because the idea is to be a cost-effective player for the masses. As a result, these two companies fall within the second quadrant that control heavily on price but not much in the customer experience. This actually gives us the second key challenge in the ride-hailing market, the low entry barrier. Let me ask you this. Today, what exactly do you need to start a ride-hailing company? Well, the answer is you only require a fleet of vehicles equipped with drivers and a team to handle your operations. Yes, you need a commercial license to operate these vehicles, but these are not very hard to acquire. But you know what, guys? There is something that makes it even easier for a new player to enter the market called the second mover advantage. So in any market, the first mover takes the effort of educating the customer about the need for the product and actually establishes the market for it. As a result, the second mover takes the advantage of this at a much lower cost. For example, in this case, Uber was the first company in the United States that introduced ride-hailing in 2009. But one of the small second movers called Juno actually acquired their first set of drivers by using the very ratings on Uber to screen them. So you see, one of the biggest difficulties in ride-hailing is building and retaining the driver network when you have achieved a certain level of scale. This is because every time you enter a new geography, this network has to be rebuilt from the scratch and drivers need to be incentivized enough again to ensure that they remain loyal. This is an extremely time-consuming process. In fact, globally, Uber has actually understood this pain point of the industry very well, which is why it has taken measures to build this network rapidly by acquiring the local players and leveraging their network, just like in the Middle East when they acquired Careem.
A very big deal in ride sharing to tell you about this morning. Uber is buying the Middle Eastern rival Careem for $3.1 billion.
Careem and Uber, you can't underestimate the impact to the tech, the startup, whole ecosystem here, and it's hugely exciting across every element.
Then comes India's congestion problem. If you look at the data right now, the average speed in Indian cities is just 24 kilometers an hour. That is the sheer amount of traffic on our roads. In fact, Bangalore and Kolkata are among the top 3 most congested cities in the entire world, with over 100 hours lost per year in travel time during rush hours. This heavily impacts the productivity of the driver, since the time that could have been spent in serving another passenger is now wasted in traffic. As a result, both the earnings of the driver and the platform are affected. And not only this, the congestion also increases the time that the driver spends going to pick up the next passenger, which again directly influences the waiting time. So if it is so difficult to operate this business in India, why hasn't Uber taken an exit yet, even though it is in losses and facing resistance from drivers?
Uber India has laid off 600 employees.
Cab drivers have launched a no AC campaign.
Ola Uber! Ola Uber!
जिस प्रकार से हम लोगों को ये किलोमीटर का रेट दिया जा रहा है वो बहुत ही कम है। 3 महीने से मैंने मेरे स्कूल के बच्चों के फीस नहीं भरे हैं, घर का रेंट नहीं भरा है मैडम, घर में खाने को तक का पैसा नहीं है।
पहले जब जुड़ा था तो अपना घर खर्चा भी चल जाता था, लेकिन आज ये हालात है कि हम घर खर्चा तो छोड़िए, अपने बच्चों की दवाई तक का पैसा नहीं बचा सकते।
Well, when Uber faced a similar problem in China with Didi and Grab in Singapore, the decision was quite simple. Quit operations in the country and sell it to the next best competitor. But in India, the story is a little complicated. Back in 2022, a few reports did emerge about an Ola and Uber merger, but were completely denied by the two companies. Moreover, India is the second biggest market for ride-hailing after China. So exiting would mean losing out on the opportunity to capitalize on a large market again. As a result, Uber is stuck in the markets with no opportunity for an exit, giving us the fourth challenge in the ride-hailing industry: a high exit barrier. If anything, ride-hailing is not the end towards increasing the switching cost for the customer. Uber actually introduced Uber Eats in India in 2017, which was a food delivery app that eventually failed and was acquired by Zomato just 3 years later. Apart from the product difficulties that Uber Eats faced, there is something different about this that has been done globally. So after Uber's exit from Singapore, instead of building standalone apps, Grab has been building a super app for everyday life that focuses on food delivery and banking along with ride-hailing. But why is this important? And is this even relevant? Well, yes. This actually showcases the use case of how ride-hailing companies who have achieved scale can possibly expand their offerings to make their customers much more loyal to their platform. While this might be difficult to implement in India, it shows how the dynamics of this industry can possibly change in the time to come. Now the question is, if the ride-hailing market is truly so challenging and unfavorable, how have these companies identified and are now banking on these billion-dollar gaps that are eating away Ola and Uber's market? So if we look at the ride-hailing market, we have seen how Ola and Uber use an aggregator model that simply connects the driver to the customer for a commission. This is an extremely asset-light model that in a way acts like a marketplace. But you know what, guys? It becomes extremely difficult to control the customer experience when you don't actually own the vehicle, which is why Ola and Uber have faced a lot of heat over surge pricing, cancellations, and other safety issues.
The CEO of Uber was pressurized to finally quit his job because he apparently did not take prominent action against many of those who were involved in sexual assault cases.
Uber, for instance, I just tried getting on the app and here's what it says: surge pricing is underway.
Ola और Uber जैसी कंपनियां बिना छूट दे दी गई है कि ये 3 गुना तक सर्ज प्राइसिंग वसूलें.
And not only this, even the drivers have been protesting against these companies over and over again.
This is the 8th day of the Ola-Uber strike.
Drivers protesting against the low fares and the lack of basic amenities.
This was the exact idea with which BluSmart was founded, with something known as the non-aggregator model. You see, instead of onboarding drivers who already own the vehicles, a company like BluSmart actually builds their own infrastructure. And this is how it works. Usually, there is a manufacturer like Tata Motors or Mahindra that sells the vehicles to a leasing company. This leasing company, like EESL or IREDA in BluSmart's case, actually then owns the vehicle and leases it out to a ride-hailing company like BluSmart for their operations in exchange for a monthly rent and a marginal deposit for the car. This is called an asset-heavy model, since now the company has taken over the asset responsibilities like EMIs, maintenance, and fuel costs from the driver. But you know, in BluSmart's case, there is one thing in particular that is very interesting. BluSmart is not actually a ride-hailing company, it is an energy company. What do I mean by this? Let me explain. Apart from building this vehicle infrastructure, they're also building a charging infrastructure under a separate vertical called BluSmart Charge. This is because BluSmart Fleet, the ride-hailing business, operates only electric vehicles which require this. So similar to the leasing of vehicles, a manufacturer sells the charging equipment to BluSmart Charge that builds these hubs where the EVs of BluSmart Fleet are actually charged and serviced at the same place for a fee. And here, instead of charging a commission, drivers are hired full-time for a fixed salary, which is essential for a non-aggregator model. This has actually turned out to be quite favorable, since now the drivers are only focused on the customer experience, which is actually why almost 40% of BluSmart drivers belonged to Uber and Ola's workforce priorly, according to the founder. However, here comes a challenge. You see, with the leasing of vehicles, the driver salaries, and the charging infra, the fixed costs that come with this model remain constant even if your vehicle is empty and not earning any revenue. As a result, this has become an extremely operations heavy business, just like the airlines industry. So at all times, BluSmart is continuously using data analytics to focus on how they can get the maximum output from their EV. Let's take a look at this graph on how BluSmart optimizes for the driver to car ratio. So the line graph here represents the number of drivers online at a given hour. For example, at 9 AM there are exactly 18 drivers online. This is then mapped to the bars here that represent the hourly earning potential at a given hour. In very simple terms, guys, this represents the demand at this hour. For example, at 9 AM, the earning potential is approximately 225 rupees. Together, this shows how much is the demand by customers and the supply that the company is making available at an hour like 9 AM. This graph gives us two very important insights. First, the demand is extremely sizable from 5 PM to 7 AM. However, the gap between the line and the bar suggests that this is highly underserved, since the number of drivers are far lesser than what is required. Secondly, the demand from 8 AM till 4 PM has been mapped with more drivers than needed, indicating a situation of oversupply. At this rate, a car produces approximately 43 rides per week, with almost one driver for each car. Now look at what happens when the number of drivers per car is increased by 20%. Quite evident, right? While the problem still persists, this marks a step towards consistent improvisation of operations. This small graph leads to a 20% increase in revenue per vehicle. So while your costs more or less remain the same, you are able to generate much more revenue than earlier. This is exactly how BluSmart leverages data analytics to streamline their operations and generate the alpha that they do. And not only this, at all points, the value chain is aimed at maximizing the output from the vehicle. For example, all cars undergo a cycle of slow charge after 2 to 4 cycles of fast charging in order to maximize the life of the battery. Even the charging station becomes a touch point for cleaning the vehicle during this downtime when it is being charged to maintain productivity and the customer experience. In fact, their core value proposition is actually aligned to eliminate surge pricing and cancellations. So if we look at our focus map again, BluSmart not only controls heavily on the pricing, but also the customer experience. And this is where another company following the non-aggregator model comes in, called Shoffr, that targets an even more niche audience of customers who want a luxury ride-hailing experience to the airport. However, there is one key difference that acts as a major challenge. Shoffr actually outrightly purchases the vehicle instead of leasing it, and also does not actually own the charging infrastructure required for this model. But wait, can you guess the problem with this model? Well, firstly, this not only becomes an asset heavy, but also a capex heavy business. Purchasing the car outright requires significant capital for the down payment, and especially more since this is a premium vehicle like the BYD E6 that they currently use, which costs approximately 30 lakh rupees. As a result, expanding its fleet becomes quite difficult in a short amount of time. Secondly, by purchasing the vehicle, the company is left with all the problems associated with the battery and would ultimately be exposed to a much older average fleet age relative to what would have been in the leasing model. Yes, while a 3x return on investment can certainly be earned, this still poses a risk on the company's financials. But you see, a non-aggregator model is not the only way to go about building a ride-hailing business in India. If you return to our focus map, you will observe that both the aggregator and non-aggregator models call for a high control on pricing, which creates the problem of inflexibility for the customer. For example, assume that you are in a hurry and in need to reach your office as soon as possible. So you go to one of the ride-hailing apps that may provide you a discount but show you a waiting time of 15 minutes, which is actually your total travel time. In this case of an emergency, you would be willing to pay a premium just to secure a ride so that you get there fast enough. But the app does not provide for this at all. And this is exactly what led to the introduction of the zero commission model by Namma Yatri in 2022. InDrive, a California-based company, has been following this model for the four-wheeler category. Similarly, even Rapido has implemented this across their services. And now, even Uber has implemented this model due to repeated resistance from drivers. So, what exactly is the zero commission model? And why are so many companies adopting this?
This is an app which is now gaining attention called as Namma Yatri.
A riding app that charges no commission fee, has no surge pricing and claims zero cancellations. Its name is Namma Yatri, a Bangalore-based auto booking application.
Now, Namma Yatri, a new player in the ride-hailing industry, offers zero commission rentals for auto.
Well, you see, in this model, in a way, your driver becomes your customer. This is because instead of charging commissions from them, you sell them a subscription fee on a per day or per month basis for unlimited rides. So in exchange for a subscription fee, you give access to all the demand that comes through your platform to the driver directly. Which is why this shifts the company to more of a software as a service model. And you know why this makes sense, especially for drivers. Imagine an auto driver that completes 10 rides a day at an average of rupees 100 each, leading to 1,000 rupee in revenue. While working with an aggregator like Uber and Ola, in this case, out of the 1,000 rupees, effectively 30% will be charged as commission by the platform, leaving only 700 rupees for the driver as his daily earnings. Out of this, he then needs to pay the EMI for his vehicle, fuel costs, maintenance, and even insurance, which leaves him with very little cash to actually take home with him. Now imagine if this driver was working for a zero commission model platform like Namma Yatri. In this case, only 20 rupees would be charged to the driver on the 1,000 rupee income earned by him on that day. This is a significant difference, which allows the driver to have much more earnings to take home. Not only this, it also makes sense for the customers. This is because the platform deliberately has very low control on pricing and actually allows drivers and customers to decide the price using a haggle offer feature. Basically, since this pricing is decided by an algorithm, there are a lot of times that the prices are not actually up to the expectations of a driver, which often leads to you as the customer waiting to find a driver who agrees to take you to your destination. In this case, when you know that the algorithm's pricing is less likely to be in sync with the driver's expectations, you can adjust the price and place a bid. For example, imagine on your phone you see the fare from your college to your home for 100 rupees, which might be quite low than what is usually charged by a driver. Now, because of this feature, you can change the bid to a higher price that might be in sync with what a driver is expected to be paid, and thus find a ride home much sooner and easier. This is actually a revolutionary step that has transformed the entire market, leading to more and more companies adopting this. It not only allows the driver access to higher earnings, but also enables flexibility for the customer, which is exactly what has prompted Uber to shift away from the commission model to the SaaS model for its three-wheeler category. So if we look at our focus map again, we will observe that this model will be placed low on controlling both price and experience, because the platform is concerned about taking care of their customer, which in this case is the driver. But you know what? Rapido has just pivoted away from this model for their two-wheeler category to stick to a commission model. Yes, you heard that right, a two-wheeler category. You see, back in 2014, while Ola had already introduced autos in India for ride-hailing, a problem was still prevalent. And that is, the intercity commute was still inefficient because of the congestion, and an affordable and practical solution was needed. This is exactly where Rapido's value proposition comes in, who identified the power of two-wheelers. Well, India is one of the largest two-wheeler markets in the entire world, and bikes can easily navigate through traffic and in places where even three-wheelers could not. This hypothesis is exactly what inspired the idea to launch Rapido. In fact, this was so disruptive that within 1 year of Rapido entering the market, Uber launched their own two-wheeler vertical called Uber Moto. And this market today is one of the fastest growing segments in this industry. But you know something even more fascinating? What truly made this idea so revolutionary was that the drivers who currently are a part of the two-wheeler segment are not even working as full-time drivers. This is actually a part-time job for them to help them earn some extra cash, which is perfectly positioned for them. So most drivers actually do only 2 or 3 rides a day, or might not do any rides a day at all, which is why they would be reluctant to purchase a monthly subscription. As a result, the company aims to stick to the commission model. This becomes an extremely important lesson in understanding how the dynamics of the two-wheeler market work. And if you want to build a startup in this industry, a subscription model might not be the most ideal way to go. So this is how new entrants are disrupting the ride-hailing industry with the tiny breadcrumbs that Uber and Ola have missed out on over the years. Hi everyone, I'm Sparsh Jain from Venture Labs. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this case study, do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to stay tuned to more such content to continue defining disruption with us. We'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. Until then, we are here with you to learn, build, and innovate.